Dearborn Girl is a weekly podcast that catalogs the beautifully complex stories of Arab and or Muslim women from the Dearborn community. If you haven't heard, Dearborn, Michigan is home to the largest Arab Muslim population in any city outside of the Middle East. But for some reason, we are currently the least important characters in our own narrative. We know this show will inspire urgent conversation both within our community and within the greater Arab world, and we are thrilled to be at the forefront of a movement in the making. Listen along as we grab the mic and add some much-needed Dearborn Girl spice to your morning chai. This week's DG Likes is realtor Ali Subuh from Keller Williams Legacy in West Dearborn. Ali has 3 years of experience selling real estate and specializes in the Metro Detroit area with a specific interest in his Dearborn and Dearborn Heights communities. Ali takes pride in assisting first-time home buyers find their perfect home. He'll make sure to get you into your perfect home, and will make sure you feel prepared with all you need to know about your new, exciting adventure. If you're looking to buy or sell, give Ali a call at 313-918-6000 or schedule your free consultation at his office at 22371 West Village Drive in West Dearborn.
Yasmin Kadu here, your Dearborn Girl poster child that is a lifelong learner and loves all things social justice. Today we have the pleasure of talking to Batoul, the self-proclaimed hijabi in a white coat, medicine, literature, and art enthusiast, and Bint al-Jnoub. Hi, Batoul.
Hi, Yasmin.
So, Batoul, we know you love ice cream, and we love Dearborn. So tell me, if Dearborn was an ice cream flavor, what would she be?
Wow, that's an interesting question to start out with. Actually, I don't even have to think about it. 100% Shatila ice cream, specifically the pistachio ice cream.
Why?
Well, I feel like Shatila is such a staple for Dearborn in terms of sweets and ice cream. But, you know, pistachio itself is a type of nut, and it's a tree that grows in Central Asia and in the Middle East, and I feel like most people who live in Dearborn are from the Middle East. And the pistachio itself has a very hard exterior, which we sometimes come off as being from Dearborn. But when you kind of get to know us, and when you break bread with us, and you really see us as human beings, and you open our shell like a pistachio, you'd find that we are down to earth, the most real people you'll ever meet, and we're just super welcoming.
That's really beautiful. I actually know a lot of people that ship that specific ice cream flavor to themselves when they're outside of Dearborn because they miss it.
Yeah, I've done that on multiple occasions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I lived in Dearborn for 2 years. I lived outside of Dearborn for 2 years, and one of the things I mostly missed, apart from my parents and of course my family, was Shatila ice cream. So, you know, how do I get it? I shipped it over.
Wow, that's real dedication. Shout out to Shatila. Okay, Batoul, so tell me about your Dearborn Girl story.
So I came to Dearborn, it's going to be 13 years, and it's pretty wild me thinking about it, that the time has gone by so fast. But I came here when I was 12 years old, and I came here not so much because I wanted to come here, but because I had no other choice. I was raised in Lebanon for 8 years of my life, and I was raised in a small village in south of Lebanon, which is why my mom and my friends call me Bint al-Jnoub. And I had an amazing childhood. Beautiful. We lived in a house there. It was 10 minutes away from the Mediterranean. And if anybody who's Lebanese watching, you know how amazing the Mediterranean is, and you know how amazing Lebanese climate is.
Oh, yes.
It's beautiful. And I had a wonderful childhood. I had friends. I went to school every day. They taught us Arabic. They taught us English. They taught us French. And unfortunately, in 2006, Lebanon was under war, and it was very unsafe being there. And I was living at the time with my mom, my two younger sisters, and my older brother. My dad was already living in Dearborn, and we always had the intention of coming here, but we always thought we wanted to plan coming to Dearborn, but because of the war, we had no other choice but to flee for our safety.
So how much longer after the war began did you guys leave and come to Dearborn?
So the war began, I believe, mid-May. Mm-hmm. And we came here, and I remember the day, June 22nd, 2006.
Wow.
Yeah. It was 3 days of travel. By the time we wanted to escape, the Beirut airport was bombed. So the only way that you can leave Lebanese shores were by water. So we boarded a ship that took us to Cyprus. And I remember when we boarded the ship and it came time to sail, we all kind of looked back as the ship was sailing away from the shore, and you could clearly see that the sky was gray above the airport, and it just, the Lebanon that you grew up loving just looked completely different. And I remember there was a woman and a child crying and saying, "Mama, will we ever be back home?" And the lady said something which still resonates with me. And she said, she quoted a verse from the Quran, and she said, "Kul lan yusibuna illa ma kataballahu lana," which means, nothing shall ever happen to us except what Allah has ordained to us.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And I didn't know where we were going. I knew we were going to the city called Dearborn, but I didn't know anything about it. But somehow I knew that I was going to safety. I was going to shelter. I was going to somewhere that's going to kind of embrace me and make me forget about what I had to live the past 2 weeks.
So at that point, when you guys were leaving Lebanon, had you ever been to Dearborn?
No.
Wow.
No. My only experience living in the U.S. was in California because I was born in California, but I've never been to Michigan overall before this.
So what were you thinking when you were on that boat? What were you thinking?
I was pretty angry because I didn't want to leave, but I knew I had no choice, and I knew that my mom was doing this for the safety of her children. But at the same time, I was sort of hopeful that maybe I will grow to love whatever city I end up with. And like I said, maybe the city will embrace me and teach me a lot more things that I didn't know. And I just kept being hopeful.
Tell me, did that happen?
It did. It definitely did, 100%. The specific moment I remember of first coming to Dearborn was the bus stop. We took a bus to Dearborn, and the bus stop that we stopped was on the corner of Oakman Boulevard and Michigan Avenue. And if people that are listening know that there's a Lashish restaurant there. And that was the first kind of thing I saw of Dearborn. And my dad was waiting outside, and it was nighttime. I couldn't make out a lot of things around me, but I only saw my dad. And when I saw my dad, it's like I finally realized I'm in another world, and I just collapsed in his arms.
Wow.
Literally.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling in that moment?
It was a lot of emotions. I felt happy that I made it out, that I was safe, that my sisters were safe, that my mom, my brother, and, we were one big happy family. We were reunited. But again, my thoughts were with the people that we left behind, were with my extended family that we left behind, and to the people that were escaping their homes and, couldn't escape Lebanon overall. So I was very much praying for their safety and for the safety of everybody. And yeah.
Your experience is very interesting because you have the experience of what a second wave Arab American has.
Yeah.
Because the second wave and the influx of Arabs to this country, they were fleeing war.
Yes.
And so you literally had to do the same exact thing that my dad did, which is just so interesting because your experience is just your Dearborn experience is so different than most people our age.
Absolutely. When I talk to the older generation who have escaped Lebanon from civil war at that time, we have a lot of things in common. Despite our huge age gap. Like my mom was living during times of civil war, and she would specifically recount how she used to go to school under bombing, but she valued her education so much that she didn't want to skip school, and people found it so routine there. Yeah, so I find myself relating a lot to these people, regardless of how far we are apart in age and experience.
Okay, so tell me, you got off the bus, you reunited with your family, and you guys were all here, and then what happened next?
So the next day, my dad put me in the car, and he's like, I want to show you Dearborn. Because my dad was living there 2003. So he lived there for a couple of years before we came. So he put me in the passenger seat, and we drove down Warren Avenue. And Warren Avenue is like mini Lebanon, literally.
You know what's funny you say that? I say that all the time. I say driving down Warren is, if you like squint a little, it looks like Hamra.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I was starstruck because not many streets in Lebanon have the stoplights. So seeing that was like a huge culture shock for me alone. But then you look around and you start seeing like Aswaq al-Mustafa and then Malhamat al-Fatima, Malhamat al-Rida. And I'm just like, wait. Wait, where are we right now? Like, this is pretty insane. This is cool. And then we went down, we were grocery shopping, and then everybody was speaking in Arabic with each other. And then I looked at my dad and he's like, yep, that's the Dearborn I kept telling you about over the phone, you know, when you were pretty resilient of not coming here. And, you know, day after day, I realized that, you know, this is a mini Middle East.
How old were you when you were experiencing all of this?
12.
Wow.
12.
Okay, so that's really interesting because you probably didn't think that at that time that anywhere else existed.
Exactly.
Like your home.
Yeah. When you live in the Middle East, you become so infatuated with the idea of living in the Middle East that you don't consider anywhere else, you know, home to live. Yeah. And that was the struggle for me. But the struggle was, you know, went smoothly because, again, Dearborn was not so different than the life I had in Lebanon. So,
wow, that's really, really powerful and interesting, especially with the comparisons that you're making. So, what do you think you were most surprised coming to Dearborn and finding out about the community?
So, I very much love that. You know, I made friends with people that are not from Lebanon specifically, that were Middle Eastern, that were Muslim, that were Christian. But many of my friends today are, you know, Syrian or Palestinian, and many of them are Yemeni, Iraqi, from Iran, from Pakistan. And, you know, when you grow up in Lebanon, all your friends are pretty much from Lebanon. So seeing the differences in culture and realizing that we're actually very similar, and there's so many stories, there's so many ambitions, there's so many goals that people put forth, and you get really inspired by people's stories here because, you know, for a story like mine, there's someone else that has had a similar story or even lived through worse times than me. So I have a lot of sympathy, for example, now for my friends that have family living in Yemen and my friends that have family living in Palestine and Syria, because I've lived something very similar to that. And, you know, we share our experiences and kind of we take each other's burdens and we lessen them amongst each other. So Originally, my family is from a village called Salha. And Salha right now is under Israeli occupation. It's one of the villages in the very, very south of Lebanon that is, you know, under occupation. And we can't go to it because there's basically barbed wire around it. So my family and the whole Aoun family relocated to a village near Sur called Shabriha. And we kind of called that our home. But again, it's just heartbreaking to know that your roots are taken over by other people who claimed that it's their own land when it's not. So again, I have a lot of sympathy for people that have their homes taken away from them by other occupants, like my friends from Palestine. So I completely, you know, empathize, you know, with their stories.
Do you find commonalities between you and your Palestinian? Like, when do you guys exchange stories similar?
Absolutely.
To that?
Well, first of all, I can never tell. You know how sometimes all of us Arabs have this thing where you can look at a person and tell where they're from?
No, for
when
sure.
When it comes to a lot of my Palestinian friends, and especially also Syrian friends, you can never tell, like, oh, you know, she's Lebanese, he's Palestinian.
I can't tell.
We're so similar, and even our dialect is very similar, and we really live in countries that border each other, and you know, it's far from that. You know, we're technically family, and we've always been kind of reaching our hands out for any help we need of each other.
Isn't that interesting how we both say that we can't tell the difference, but there are still so many divisions within Lebanese, Syrians, and Palestinians?
There is. I think that negative dialogue comes from, part of it is racism, and part of it is us lacking empathy for other people. We really don't understand kind of where, you know, our Syrian friends are coming from or our Palestinian friends are coming from, especially now with the whole, what they call refugee crisis. that is looked upon by most people in the United States as a negative thing. And we somehow got absorbed into that negative dialogue. And we sort of looked at them like, like they're sort of bad people coming here. When in reality, when we were actually living in Lebanon, a lot of people from Lebanon fled the Lebanese war to Syria. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Syrians were open into kind of taking us into their homes and giving us safety and giving us shelter. So I feel like the smallest thing we can do for them now is any incoming people from any Middle Eastern country, to Dearborn especially, Middle East 2.0, we should have that empathy, and we should take these people into not just our homes, but our hearts and our soul, literally.
It's interesting you say that, because everything you're describing about Dearborn is applicable to Lebanon, mm-hmm. with specifically Syrian and Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That is really interesting too when you think about that.
I think we bring a lot of culture with us when we come from the Middle East. We bring a lot of traditions with us, and it's very hard to balance modern American society with the cultural norms that you bring from the Middle East. And I think the whole point of a Dearborn girl is that she has these responsibilities. She has to balance tradition. She has to balance religion. She has to balance hijab, while living in a modern American society that tells her that some of the things she believes in are not really what she should believe in.
How do you find that balance?
I very much am in tune with my goals in life, with my religion, with the fact that I wear hijab. I seek a lot of advice from Allah, from God, but I also seek a lot of advice from people that came here and people that successfully were able to balance culture with modernism. My family is very much grounded. My family gives us freedom within our boundaries of, mm-hmm. Seeking out opportunities, but at the same time, never forgetting kind of where you came from. Because for me, for example, being first generation here in Dearborn, my parents always remind me that there's a legacy that I have to build. For my kids and my sister's kids and my brother's future children. And, you have to start from somewhere and kind of build the groundworks for more generations to come. So,
what do you think the biggest obstacle in doing that and preserving your culture and holding on to the multiple facets of your identity?
I think it's trying to fit in mostly with society.
Tell me about that.
So, for example, I pride myself on going into a career in medicine. I'm a fourth-year medical student, and in 98 days, I graduate and become a doctor. Who's counting, though? I am. By the minute,
that's amazing.
By the minute and the second, literally. But I don't show it too much. When I went to medical school, I find it very hard to juggle things like religion, career goals, what people thought of me, because I was always degrading myself and saying that I stand out, nobody around me looks like me. So a lot of it actually comes from own self-criticism and the fact that you don't love yourself enough to think that you can stand out in such a beautiful way in society. And I feel like a lot what's happening on the news now and with the Trump administration, we lost the idea of celebrating ourselves or celebrating our heritage because other people in politics decided that we are not worthy enough for it, where we are clearly fighting back that notion. But it was just very hard for me overall to basically simply love myself.
I love that. So basically you fight racism by using self-love.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And by standing up to what I believe in, because you have hundreds of people telling you that what you're doing and what you're standing up for, the way you're dressing is not our norm, when it's like, wait a second. I'm trying to fit into your society, but at the same time, I don't want to lose myself in that process.
No, of course. I think that's probably one of the most important things that immigrants struggle with. How do you balance and juggle your old self and your new self type deal?
So I think when people see me, the first thing they ask about is the hijab, because You know, when people say you have one chance to make a first impression, I have 0 chances. You basically look at me and you already get a first impression from me.
Yeah.
So when you have a dialogue with me, I try to make it worth your while. I try to highlight that I am more than just my exterior. You know, I have a lot of stories. I have a lot of inspiration. I have a lot of words to offer you if you ask, and if you ask the right questions. I feel like in the beginning of my medical school journey, because I didn't go to medical school in Michigan, I had to move away. I felt it was really hard at the beginning to make friends because my colleagues back then didn't know a lot of hijabis and didn't know a lot of Middle Eastern people.
Okay.
So I felt like I had to answer a lot of their questions in terms of, you know, why do you wear hijab? Or where is Lebanon? Or, oh, so you make friends with people that are not just from Lebanon. Oh, tell us more about Dearborn.
Oh,
so I found myself answering a lot of questions, and I finding myself sharing a lot of the baklava that comes in the mail with them, because that was the only way I can start easing them in to kind of, you know, liking me and liking where I came from.
That tactic is so important. No, seriously, because you hear, my grandfather is infamous for this. Every time he goes to the doctors, he takes a tray of betlewa. And people love him for that because food, the connection, food to culture is so seamless and easy to make it comforting and welcoming and interesting.
Big time.
Think about like how many white restaurants sell hummus. I mean, they do a horrible job, but they love our culture. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
So is that something you found within conversations, that people have become more receptive when you've explained, like, this is where Lebanon is. This is how beautiful my country is.
Oh, yeah.
These are the values that we have.
Yeah. I think people see the love of something through your eyes. The more enthusiastic you be at telling people your story and telling people that, like you said, this is Lebanon. You know, they see how much you love it, so they learn to love it with you. And right now, some of my friends from med school even like appreciate the fact that like during Eid, they would message me and they were like, hey, happy Eid. Or like during like some Muslim holidays, they will always message me and keep me in mind, which is amazing because before I met them, they kind of didn't know much. And they're like, I get a lot of thank you because we will run into patients in the future and run into people who we are going to make, you know, relationships with that sometimes are not from our culture. So now you kind of gave us a way to connect with these people.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are you most proud of about your journey so far?
You know, I say I have a long way to go left in life, inshallah. But I feel like looking back at the 12-year-old girl who stopped at that bus stop and she was so anxious. She was in tears. She was a mess. She literally came with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. I mean, I was literally the embodiment of I came from nothing.
Wow.
And seeing how far I've come, alhamdulillah, with the support of my community, with the support of the friends that I made here in Dearborn and outside of Dearborn, and the belief they showed and the investment they had in my future, I don't think I can ever give back as much as they gave me. And I am eternally grateful for that.
What do you think specifically, you talked about being so proud of your community, that community obviously being Dearborn. What was the most important thing that Dearborn gave to you?
First of all, it gave me safety. It gave me safety and shelter before I stepped foot into it. Mm-hmm. It gave me a reason to keep going. It gave me sort of hope that I can be a person larger than life, that I can accomplish dreams and goals that are larger than life. And it just really allowed me to be around people that, again, that think intellectually similar to me and just really want what's best for you.
That's really beautiful, because you hear sometimes people saying that like Dearborn's held them back, and literally the opposite of everything you just described. What would you say to those people?
You know, I feel like if you don't like the place you live in, it comes more from you as a person than from the city that you live in. I feel like for those people, you haven't tried hard enough, you know? And I go back to the first thing I said was about the pistachio, is that we have a hard cover. But really, once you get to know us, once you enter our homes, once you start really embracing Dearborn and you don't have to embrace it as your permanent residence for life. You can use it for a couple years, for as many, years as you want, as a groundwork for something more amazing to happen worldwide or even nationally. But I feel like you have to love the people. You have to love the places. You have to love the town. You have to love the churches. You have to love the mosques, the jamias. You have to love the people. You literally have to live and breathe Dearborn in order for you to love it. And I say to these people, because I was sort of one of them, when you leave here, this city, whether it's for a week, whether you go on vacation or anywhere in the world or in the United States, you will realize how important Dearborn is to you. Because when I left for 2 years, all what I kept thinking during my time is, I can't wait to be back. I can't wait to be back in a city that uplifts me, because no other city will kind of praise you and encourage you to do what you want than this city.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Batoul. This was amazing.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you to everybody that are listening.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with some of your favorite Dearborn girls. If you haven't subscribed already, we have no idea what you're waiting for. And while you're anxiously waiting for next week's episode to drop, be sure to follow us on Instagram at dearborn.girl or visit us at www.fordearborn.com. See you next week.